The Los Angeles Chargers 2024 season was actually really good. So in this video, let's go ahead and do my 2025 mock-off season for the LA Chargers. But if you guys do want to enjoy the video, hit the like and subscribe button. Let's hop into it. So the way the video is going to work is we're going to be doing everything that the LA Chargers will be doing this offseason. We're going to begin by managing their finances in the team assets portion of the video. Then we'll talk about all the team free agents this team does have, who we're going to re-sign and who we're going to let walk. Then we'll talk about some positional team needs. Then we'll go over my free agency plan. And then lastly, we'll be doing 2 3-round mock drafts. With that said, we are going to begin with the team assets portion of the video. And I got to be honest with you, this team is just loaded. Funnily enough, this LA Chargers team a few years ago was not in the greatest of positions, but man, they currently sit with about $64 million in cap space. Now, over the cap does say $70 million, but that is not taken into account the recent contract agreement between Elijah Molden and the LA Chargers. By the way, incredible contract for both sides. So as I mentioned, they have around $64 million of open cap space to work with, but after we extend a few players and cut a few players, we're going to be able to open up a lot more. So the first thing I'm going to do is give 2 extensions. Those extensions will be to Rashawn Slater and Cameron Dicker. Now, in terms of the actual number, in terms of how much these guys will actually get paid, I'm going to make an assumption that Rashawn Slater is going to be at least a top 10 offensive tackle in terms of contract size. And then for Cameron Dicker, I would assume that he's probably going to be the highest paid kicker in the league. So keep that in mind as you go forward in 2026 and beyond. But in terms of how much it opens up in 2025, extending Rashawn Slater opens $14 million and extending Cameron Dicker opens like $200,000. So I just put $0 million. When it comes to restructuring contracts, the only contract that would make some level of sense was Justin Herbert, but I did not view it as a necessity because we could open up a lot more cap space by just cutting a few players. In terms of who I am going to be cutting, I'm going to be cutting a few players. The first player I'm going to be cutting is going to be Joey Bosa. Now, obviously, Joey Bosa is one of those dudes who, when healthy, you're talking about one of the better players in the league, but just has not been able to consistently stay healthy. And even when he has been healthy, he hasn't been the same Joey Bosa that we knew him from his earlier years. He's less productive, he's more injured, and at this stage, I do believe the LA Chargers should be looking to go a little bit younger within that position, so ultimately, Joey Bosa was a little bit of a cap casualty. By cutting him, you're opening up approximately $25 million in open cap space. Yes, there will be some dead money, but it is what it is. Next, we're going to be cutting Trey Pipkins, which will open up $6.5 million of open cap space. He's been given plenty of opportunities to prove that he is the guy to play that right guard or somewhere along the interior of the offensive line, but he just has never been consistently good. He's just been a very average to below average starter, and at this point, I do think an upgrade is due within the interior of the offensive line, and I think that does begin with Trey Pipkins. We'll also cut Gus Edwards, which opens up around $3 million. Now, I'm not as committed to this idea about cutting Gus Edwards because I think he is a quality back, but at the same time, it is a loaded draft class filled with a lot of good running backs, and I do plan on taking at least one within my mock draft section. So because of that, I kind of viewed Gus Edwards as a bit more expendable by cutting him, as I mentioned, $3 million in open cap space. So after that, we went from $64 million in open cap space all the way up to $112.5 million in open cap space in 2025. Now, do take into account that there are a couple contracts that we'll be needing to hand out in future years to already younger players, so we can go a little bit more crazy in free agency, but I do want to make sure that we don't overspend and overdo the free agency portion of the video. But that then leads me to the team free agents portion of the video, and the good thing for the LA Chargers is they don't really have any major players in free agency that they have to bring back. They definitely have a few that I would like to bring back, but in terms of like actual, like we have to bring this guy back, I wouldn't really say they have anybody who is like a must-have back. In terms of some names, they do have a long list of names, so just kind of hear me out on this one. Guys like Eli Apple, Bradley Bozeman, DJ Chark, J.K. Dobbins, Hayden Hurst, Troy Dye, Simi Fehoko, Poona Ford, Morgan Fox, Christian Fulton, Taylor Heineke, Tony Jefferson, Khalil Mack, Joshua Palmer, Denzel Perryman, Jalen Reagor, Asante Samuel Jr., J.K. Scott, and Tyir Tart. There's also a few other names in there, but those were, for the most part, the bigger name guys that most Chargers fans will know. Now, in terms of who I'm going to prioritize bringing back, I'm going to first off bring back Khalil Mack on a 2-year, $45 million deal. Now, this was a late addition to my mock-off season because I actually wasn't planning on bringing back Khalil Mack, and then I realized that I just had so much leftover cap space that it just wouldn't make any sense to not bring Khalil Mack back. Now, Khalil Mack is is older, and I don't view him as being a long-term piece of this organization for the next 5 to 6 years. Obviously, a 2-year deal, I think that is about what's left in his prime. He's still somebody who is a very productive player. He's excellent in run defense and still can get to the quarterback. Because this team doesn't really have incredible depth within the edge rushing room, I decided to bring back Khalil Mack. It is a little bit more expensive than what I would like to pay, but ultimately, I am getting a quality player who could still play at a higher level. And again, I didn't want to create a drastic need in the edge rushing room when this team does have many more needs they need to look to address. Then I'm going to bring back Poona Ford on a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. Now, do keep in mind, a lot of these contracts are based off of PFF predictions or over the cap projections. So this is a contract that potentially could be a little bit more, but that is what PFF said, so that's what I'm going to go with here. Poona Ford was an incredible part of this defensive line last year, both getting to the quarterback as well as being a dominant run stuffer. Again, kind of like Khalil Mack, he's not necessarily somebody who I view as being on the team for the next 4 to 5 years, like a Justin Herbert or a Ladd McConkey, but I do view him as being one of those veteran guys who can step in there and just make plays, and for $3.5 million, it was kind of a no-brainer. The same thing can also be said for Tyler Tart on a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. Kind of the same principles about Poona Ford, but for Tyler Tart, he's just not as good as Poona Ford, but he's still a very quality rotational defensive lineman, so I brought him back on a pretty fair deal. Next, I'm going to bring back J.K. Dobbins on a 2-year, $7 million deal. J.K. Dobbins last year, man, was just fantastic when he's healthy. Now, he does bring the risk of potentially getting injured again, but because of how good he was with his LA Chargers team when he was healthy, I did not want to go out there and not bring him back. I viewed him as being somebody who is relatively affordable, while at the same time, if he can stay healthy, is just going to be a productive player for this team. So ultimately, I brought him back. I'm going to bring back a couple more depth options. We're going to begin by bringing back Bradley Bozeman on a 1-year, $2 million deal. Now, I do think this will be incredibly controversial by a lot of Chargers fans, but ultimately for me, I just want Bradley Bozeman to be my backup center. That's why I decided to bring him back, because we let guys like Sam Mustipher go and some other offensive linemen. Bringing back Bradley Bozeman to be my backup just made a little bit of sense, and if there are some injuries, he can, of course, go out there and play. We'll also bring back J.K. Scott, Troy Dye, and Tony Jefferson, all on deals worth around $2 million for Troy Dye and J.K. Scott. 2-year deals for Tony Jefferson, a 1-year deal. Now, I will say we do have a little bit of additional cap space at the end of the video, so if there is a player who I did not mention who maybe is a bigger part of this special teams or just some stuff that I'm not too familiar with, you could, of course, bring those guys back. But in terms of who I know and who I would personally bring back, those are the major names who I would bring back. But after we go ahead and sign those guys, we went from $112.5 million all the way down to $72.5 million, which is still a lot of cap space to work with. So with that said, let's now talk about what this team needs to look to address in the free agency and mock draft portion of this video. So as I mentioned, we are going to talk about the team needs, and this team does have a number of needs. We're going to begin with a wide receiver 2. Obviously, Ladd McConkey went out there and proved that he could be the go-to guy for Justin Jefferson, whether he's playing inside at the slot position or playing on the outside. Ladd McConkey was fantastic last year, and his connection with Justin Herbert is only going to improve. So obviously, I don't think we necessarily need a true wide receiver 1, but if we, of course, can find one, that would make a lot of sense. Quentin Johnston, to me, is going to be either our wide receiver 3 or if he can develop our wide receiver 2. Unfortunately, he just really has not been worthy of the first round pick that he was taken in, but he was viewed as a project player, and well, he's only 2 years into his career, and I would say that last year was a better year than his first year, so I still want to give him time. I'm not ready to just quit on Quentin Johnston, but I do want to see a little bit more from him next year in year 3. Hopefully, he could take a sizable jump to get closer to around 800 yards receiving, so we'll have to wait and see if Quentin Johnston can do that, but we really do need another wide receiver because we let guys like Jalen Reagor and Joshua Palmer go and DJ Chark, so we're going to have to kind of retool the shed there in the receiving room. Interior offensive line is also a bit of need. Now, your tackle positions are set. Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater, you feel incredible about for the foreseeable future. Zion Johnson at left guard, I think you feel okay with him moving forward, but Bradley Bozeman at center and, of course, your right guard position have got to be major positions of upgrade. Ideally, I would like to get somebody who is a really good, fantastic player to play guard, and then I can find a center in this year's draft, but of course, probably a little bit easier said than done, but of course, we will of course get to that at some point. I also think tight end is a position of need too. Of course, you do have Will Dissly, who you feel okay if he is your starter next year, but if you can find an upgrade, I definitely do think you could do so. I will say this is a really good tight end class where you can get a couple of major upgrades in this year's draft, so I do think that the draft is where I'm going to look to find a tight end. Running back is also a position positional need, because we let go of Gus Edwards, we're only running back that I think is really capable of starting is J.K. Dobbins, and we know his injury history. So as I mentioned earlier, I do want to bring a running back in free agency or in the draft. Cornerback is also a bit of a need because we didn't bring back either Christian Fulton or Asante Samuel. We do have a little bit of a void with that cornerback 1 position. Now, I will say we do have some really young players who showed a lot of potential. Guys like Tahib Steele, Cam Hart, Jasir Taylor, like all those guys, I feel pretty good about their future. But in terms of being a true cornerback 1, maybe I'm not quite yet there. So I do think we should go out there and maybe pick up a veteran who can play that cornerback 1 position for the foreseeable future. And edge rusher is also a need because we let go of Joey Bosa. I am a little bit worried about the pass rush this year. So ideally bringing in a veteran in free agency and probably adding some youth in the draft would make a little bit of sense for that position group as well. But with that said, let's now go ahead and hop into my free agency plan. Now, again, I do want to reiterate that we have $72.5 million in open cap space, so we have a lot of money to go out there and spend on some bigger and better free agents. We're going to begin with one of the most sought after players by basically every single team that needs offensive line help. I'm going to go ahead and sign Trey Smith to a 4-year, $88 million deal. Now, I do want to say this, because this is a mock offseason video, it's not going to be incredibly realistic. This is just what I would personally do if I was able to just go out there and pick up certain players. Obviously, Trey Smith is going to have a lot of attention in this year's free agency class. So do I think the Chargers will sign Trey Smith? No. But if they can, I definitely do think they should go after him. If you're not satisfied with Trey Smith, there are some other really good offensive guards out there like Will Fries and a couple other names too. So you could go after those guys. But again, this is just what I would personally do if I could add this guy to my team, and Trey Smith would be my #1 target. I know his performance in the Super Bowl maybe wasn't what you would want from somebody who's going to be making $22 million a year, but I think that was a bit of an outlier game. And truth be told, I don't really think he played all that bad. The rest of the offensive line around him did play that bad, and I think it also did affect Trey Smith a tad bit, but I didn't think his performance was as bad as some people are making it out to be. Trey Smith has just been damn consistent for this Chiefs team. He does not give up sacks. He's a physical run blocker. I just think he would fit the identity of this offensive line so well. You have your 2 big physical tackles, and then inside having Zion Johnson, and then having a dominant center that you can get in this year's draft class, and then of course taking Trey Smith to play your right guard. I mean, having Trey Smith and Joe Alt would make this offensive line one of the scariest offensive lines out there that no team would want to face. I know that it is a divisional rival. He plays for the Chiefs. He's going to the Chargers, but I don't think that players care as much as fans do. So I'll just throw that out there. I'm going to stick to the offense here by bringing in a wide receiver too. I'm going to bring in Darius Slayton on a 3-year, $36 million deal. I have been wanting to put Darius Slayton in these videos for so long, but I just have not found a team that would realistically send money to Darius Slayton. But I think the LA Chargers are a realistic option for him to actually go to. He would essentially fill in at that wide receiver 2 position and be a better version of what Joshua Palmer and DJ Chark are. Darius Slayton is long, lengthy, he's athletic, he is a guy who can win downfield. He can also win in the underneath stuff too. I just think he is kind of the perfect player to throw in at this trio of wide receivers, having Ladd McConkey play a bit more of your slot, who can also have flexibility to play on the outside, but be a bit more of that Justin Herbert go-to guy. And then having Darius Slayton essentially play, I don't want to say the Keenan Allen, Mike Williams role, but something along those lines where he can go a little bit more deep and can be just a consistent weapon that Justin Herbert can go to as his second option. And then Quentin Johnston could be the guy who has the ultimate upside, who maybe you do some gadget things with. Maybe he can win with his speed and athleticism, but as time goes on, we'll have to wait and see what Quentin Johnston can develop into. I just view Darius Slayton as being such a fun fit for this team. He would give this receiving core the size that they want, while also bringing a physicality that I don't think you're getting from Quentin Johnston right now. So I love Darius Slayton for this team. We're also bringing in Carlton Davis on a 3-year, $42 million deal. Now, I personally think Carlton Davis will stick with the Detroit Lions, but in a hypothetical situation where he doesn't get re-signed by them, I think the LA Chargers should be all in on potentially getting him. Now, as I mentioned earlier, both Christian Fulton and Asante Samuel Jr. I'm not bringing back. Asante Samuel Jr. was the one I really did consider, but he is just so bad as an open field tackler, and from what I've heard, the Chargers just do not want somebody on their team who cannot tackle. It seems like they play a very physical brand of defense, and having a cornerback who is a little bit of a liability in that department doesn't really seem like a scheme fit, even though he is really solid in coverage. Carlton Davis is somebody who brings you the best of both worlds. He's sticky in coverage, is an extremely smart veteran-like player, and is also not afraid to get his head a little bit dirty and go out there and make some tackles. Carlton Davis also has ideal size, and I think he would be that veteran cornerback one that we could play alongside our younger players, so that way we can still have a rotation of younger guys getting in there without taking away from what we have already in these young guys. I just think Carlton Davis would just make a lot of sense for this defense, and I think he would be kind of the perfect, I kind of want to say, upgrade over a guy like Asante Samuel Jr. and Christian Fulton. Chase Young on a 2-year, $34 million deal will be my next addition. Now, I think 2 years, $34 million seems a little bit expensive for Chase Young, but it is what PFF said, so ultimately I went ahead and just listened to their numbers. Chase Young, I know, has sort of the stigma of being a draft bust because of how good he looked early on into his career and how he hasn't quite yet been the same guy since then, but I would say that Chase Young has developed into becoming a really solid edge number 2 on a really good team. Now, I don't think he can be somebody who gets you 10 to 15 sacks, but I do think he's somebody who can get you 6 to 8 sacks a season. And if you put him alongside Khalil Mack, I think you're putting together a veteran duo that knows how to get to the quarterback, is also very good against the run, has good size, good length, and isn't going to get bullied out there. I think Chase Young was a fine addition, but again, I do want to find a little bit more juice off the edge in this year's draft if we can find that. But with that said, that is going to conclude my free agency plan. Again, we went from $72.5 million all the way down now to $7.5 million. With that leftover cap space, I think that will go towards re-signing some special teams guys, as well as bringing in maybe a few rotational depth options here and there. But I'm going to leave that up to you guys as to what you would want to do with that leftover money. With that said, let's now go ahead and hop into our 2 3-round mock drafts. All right, so I am up at pick number 22, and there are a lot of players on this board who I am a very big fan of. Derek Harmon is obviously probably the big name guy a lot of people might gravitate towards, but I think Micah Williams could also be a fun little project player to put on this defensive line as well. Armand Membu, I view him probably sticking more inside at guard more so than center, but I do think he can also play tackle as well, which this team obviously doesn't need. Jalen Walker's on the board. I kind of think that Jalen Walker is likely going to be gone at this point. There's been a lot of talks about him potentially going to the Carolina Panthers as early as pick 8, even though I think that's a bit of a reach. I don't think Jalen Walker will be here. Now, if he is here, hypothetically, at pick 22, I think Jalen Walker very well could be my pick here because he could sort of play both off-ball linebacker to kind of replace what you're getting from Denzel Perriman, or you could even put him at the edge. Unfortunately, Jahad Campbell is not on the board here, which he went as early as pick 15. That's kind of a bummer, to be honest with you. I would love to see him play on this Chargers team, whether it's playing as a pure edge rusher or playing as a linebacker. I think I am going to go with Micah Williams here, or I might go Colston Loveland as well if he is on the board here. Let's see. He is on the board here. I think it's between Micah Williams and Colston Loveland, but because there's obviously the Michigan bias with the LA Chargers, I am going to go ahead and take Colston Loveland here. This would be a very good upgrade to your offense, and man, your offense would go with Justin Herbert, J.K. Dobbins, Ladd McConkey, Darius Slayton, Quentin Johnston, Colston Loveland, an improved offensive line. I gotta go Colston Loveland here, man. There are some really good tight ends down the board, but I think Colston Loveland would present just a fantastic receiving threat within this offense, and you'd have so many options to go to. So I'm gonna go with Colston Loveland here. I think it'd be a great pick. We're back up at pick 54, and Darian Porter's here, as Ryan Thomas is here. Of course, we took already a corner in free agency, so that's not really that big of a need. I actually like the names that are on the board here from an edge rushing perspective. You could go Josiah Stewart, who is a little bit of a leaner, more speed rusher sort of guy. I think he's 245 pounds, 6'1", but man, he was uber productive for Michigan. 9 sacks last year, 6 sacks the year before, and then a 91.2 overall grade for PFF. This might be my pick here because there is, of course, that Michigan connection. Now, I do want to say this. I don't think that Harbaugh is just going to go for simply Michigan guys, but between Kennard, Josiah Stewart, and Jared Ivey, maybe I would consider Kyle Kennard here, 6'5", 254, maybe a bit more of a traditional frame for the edge rusher, but it's 23 years of age, very productive player, but I think I am ultimately going to go with Josiah Stewart. We're going to double down on the Michigan guys here. Again, I don't think that he's going to be targeting Michigan guys, but in a hypothetical situation, I just think Josiah Stewart makes a lot of sense here. So we'll take Josiah Stewart. Why not? All right, we're back up at pick 86, and I think now I'm going to be looking to add a running back in this year's draft class. Devin Neal, RJ Harvey, DJ Giddens. Shout out Jaden Blue. His name is finally up here on the PFF mock draft simulator, which I kind of think is a little bit shocking here, especially over some of the other names like Trevor Etienne, Khalil Mullings, Brashard Smith. A little bit surprised to see Jaden Blue this high, but I'm not going to take him here. He's more of a receiving back, if anything. I'm looking at Devin Neal here, and I think this could ultimately be my pick. 5'11", 215 pounds. I think there is a lot of similarities between the game of Devin Neal and what they already kind of have in J.K. Dobbins. We're talking about somebody who's really good out of the backfield in terms of being a pass catcher for this team. I think his vision is really solid. Now, he doesn't have maybe the biggest frame, so if you're talking about like 4th and goal with the 1 yard line, I don't think you're giving the ball off to Devin Neal, so maybe you want to go out there and maybe pick up a more bruisier styled back in the offseason. But I think Devin Neal might be my pick here. Obviously, RJ Harvey's here. I do think it would be smart to at least look at some other positions here too, such as interior offensive line, which is a bit of a need for this team. Tate Ratledge is on the board. Jared Wilson is also on the board. I don't know. I just think you could probably wait and maybe go for a Seth McLaughlin or a Jake Majors, even potentially maybe wait into the 4th round to take one of these two guys. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and take the running back here in Devin Neal. I think he could be a really solid pairing next to what you already have in, of course, J.K. Dobbins. So that's going to conclude my first of our 2-3-round mock drafts. All right, but here's the recap real quick. Colston Lovin, Josiah Stewart, Devin Neal. Let's now hop into the next one. All right, so I am back up at pick 2, and man, Kelvin Banks and Josh Simmons are on the board. I don't think either of them will be playing center in the NFL. I think they're both probably to stick at tackle. Maybe could move inside to play guard, but because we brought in Trey Smith, we already have Zion Johnson. Don't necessarily think that's that big of a need. Jalen Walker happens to be on the board yet again, but I'm not going to take him. Amarian Hampton is here, and I'm definitely considering it. Is running back a bigger need than a future edge rusher? I don't know. I personally am maybe a little bit higher on Amarian Hampton than I am Michael Williams. If Jalen Walker is here, I very well could take Jalen Walker. I think Jahad Campbell. Did Jahad Campbell go off the board? Let's see. Yeah, Jahad Campbell went off the board. He went... Am I blind? Jahad Campbell went 10th overall, which, wow, that's crazy. I didn't think he'd be off the board that early. So maybe I go Jalen Walker here. Now, Jalen Walker would present somebody who can play off-ball linebacker, or you can stick him out and play more of an outside linebacker mode. A little bit undersized right now. Needs to put on a little bit of weight, 6'2", 245. I don't really know what they would use him as, because I think he could be good in both as an edge rusher and as a off-ball linebacker. But, I mean, they have some decent linebackers. You obviously have Dan Henley, Troy Dye, and putting Jalen Walker could be very interesting. I don't know. I just think this team needs a bit more of like a true off-ball linebacker if I was to go with Jalen Walker. And if that's the case, I'd probably prefer Demetrius Knight or a Carson. So maybe we look at that in the 2nd round. But I think I'm going to go ahead and take Michael Williams here. This is a pretty deep running back class, and I feel pretty solid about taking one in the 2nd or 3rd round. Michael Williams would present a body who I think will step in day 1 and be a really good edge rush or be a really good run stuffer. It's just going to be what is his pass rushing upside, which maybe is a little bit concerning, but I do think there are some other guys on this team that could get to the quarterback. Michael Williams is a really solid athlete. I believe he played hurt for most of the year, and I think he has the twitch and agility to be a really good pass rusher. I question maybe his upside, but I do think he'll be a solid rotational starter for many years to come. I think at his best, you're looking at DeMarcus Lawrence-like. At his worst, you're looking at maybe just a really good run stuffer that gets around 5 sacks. So I feel like I'm not hyping up this pick enough, and maybe that's now making me want to take Amarian Hampton. But I do think Michael Williams has legitimate upside to be one of the better edge rushers in this year's class. So we'll go ahead and take him because I do think edge rusher is a serious need. We're back up at pick 54, and Carson Schwessinger is on the board here, and that is definitely a legitimate possibility here. I also will say I do like Danny Stutzman. I think he is massively underranked here. I don't think they've updated their linebackers here in a little bit, so keep that in mind. I do think that Danny Stutzman very well could be a 3rd or 4th round pick. I'm definitely considering Carson here because, again, you didn't bring back Denzel Perriman, and you did take Junior Colson, and you have Troy Dye and Dion Henley, so maybe I actually feel a little bit okay about that position. Let's look at the running back here. Cam Scatabo, Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson. I mean, you have your pick of the litter here, essentially. I think there's a good chance Trayvon Henderson potentially goes as a late first, and the same thing could also be said about Caleb Johnson. So if they are here at pick 54, count your blessings. These guys are just excellent players. I like Cam Scatterbo, but I think he is a little bit overranked, to be honest with you. So I'm going to go ahead and take Caleb Johnson here. I think he has prototypical size, 6 foot, 225. Just a really solid running back that could do everything at a higher level. Again, I do think JK will be your starter, but Caleb Johnson will slowly but surely take over that starting role over the course of the 2-year contract that, of course, we did give to J.K. Dobbins. And we are back up at pick 86. We took the edge rusher as well as we took the running back. Let's now look at interior offensive line. And Tate Ratledge is on the board. Jared Wilson is. Wyatt Milam on the board here. He is not. That might have been who I would have taken there. But I think I'm going to go ahead and take the interior of the offensive lineman in this one with either Jared Wilson or Tate Ratledge. Jared Wilson, obviously a bit more of a center, with Tate Ratledge having a bit more flexibility as a guard, but I think he could also potentially play center as well. I think by taking one of these two guys, you're essentially just ensuring that your offensive line is basically completely set. We addressed cornerback, we addressed edge rusher, we addressed running back. Tight end is a position of need here, but, well, Mason Taylor and Elijah Arroyo are on the board here. In fact, I actually am going to switch my perspective here and take tight end here. These three players are all definitely going to be potentially off the board by this point, but I could see a world where at least maybe 2 or 3 of them actually do slip to the 3rd round. Elijah Arroyo is a little bit more of an upside pick here. 6'4", 245, leaves a lot to be desired as a run blocker, but when it comes to being a pass catcher, very athletic player, could be sort of a receiving tight end option, but I'm not quite sold as on Elijah Arroyo as PFF is. I think Mason Taylor's a bit more of a bigger guy, 6'5", 255. I think his run blocking leaves a little bit to be desired, but I do think he has upside to be better than Elijah Arroyo. And then there's Harold Fannin Jr., who just had a massive year for Bowling Green, 6'4", 230. Obviously, this is very much a pure pass catcher at his size. If he can put on 20 pounds and still play at that level, then maybe he has potential to be a blocking tight end at some point, but I think I'll go ahead and take Harold Fannin in terms of being maybe the best pure receiving tight end on the board. Bowling Green, shout out to them, by the way. He had an incredible year. So I'll go Harold Fannin. I think he could be our future tight end alongside what we already did with our receiving core. So we'll go Harold Fannin here. And that is going to complete my second of our 2 3-round mock drafts. But you guys let me know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about my mock off season for the LA Chargers? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? And if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.